And this, of course, I always try to give context to it because the IEC national election result will tell you that from 67% to 65 to less than 60%, now 55. Do you believe that there's a genuine, strong possibility that we'll see a government of national unity in 2024?
I'm worried.
Why?
I don't think that we who have abandoned the ANC appreciate how much support it still has. And there has been this assumption that, oh, well, they're going to 45 or 40 in the next election. My worry is they just get 50. Or they get 51 or even 49 and they take some small party.
Yeah, because at 45, they can always persuade Action SA, who last time got 6%, to Tlanganisa with them and get 51.
Yeah. Look, I think at 45, we could then actually have a new government where the ANC is out of power. I do believe that. But 49 or 50, then we would have a situation where the ANC clings on for another 5 years.
Yeah, and that would be insufferable.
And that is just a prospect that is too terrible to imagine, right? Because what that would say is, no matter how much damage you have caused, we as a country are saying we reward you with more power. And then what should ANC leaders do? I mean, we've sent them the message that it's okay to do what you've done, you know. So I'm really worried that we are still not going to get the message that the only language the ANC understands is losing power. There's no other language the party understands. They still think they're doing a good job. I'm telling you, when you speak to people behind the scenes, you know, a lot of people think I come from the EFF. No, I come from a very ANC family. My mom was a senior ANC leader. My dad was in the ANC until like last week in historical time, right? So I'm actually more connected to the ANC than I am to the EFF. ANC leaders think there's nothing more they could really have done. They've done the best with what they were given. You know, the penny hasn't dropped that they have failed. And the only way it will drop is when we take power out of their hands. And I'm worried that we're still going to try and give them one more chance in 2024.
Yeah, I tend to want to agree with you on the percentages. I think we can all acknowledge that there's a strong possibility of dipping to less than 50% because, of course, we just watching the sensible chronology of what has happened, the steady decline after every national election. If last time around was 55%, you can expect that the next time around it could be 40-something. And I think it's true, actually, that you don't overrate how far they can drop because it can't go from 55 to like 39. You know, you make a conservative estimation that it could be 47%. And with this 47%, you can persuade the UDM or get
someone,
1%, persuade someone else with 15%.
And then we're in the same mess, you know. And I firmly believe we have to remove the ANC from power. So we're going to have a choice. Let's say the ANC gets 45, right? And all the opposition parties combined get 55. And then opposition parties will have a choice. Do we keep the ANC in power or do we form an opposition coalition? I firmly believe we need an opposition coalition for no other reason than that we need to send the message that if you mess up, you lose power. The ANC needs to understand that. We as South Africans need to understand that. Maybe 5 years after that, the ANC will come back, it will reform itself on the side somewhere, and you know, it'll have an interesting new regeneration. But until we send that message, then we will always be in the situation of being at the mercy of the ANC.
Yeah.
And I think someone actually has to say, I'm prepared for whatever drawbacks come with that. You know, we might even get, you know, a president we don't like. We might get...
You happy with John Steenhuisen?
No, I think that would be silly.
It wouldn't be silly. It's a logical...
No.
It's a logical possibility that if he's the leader of the biggest opposition party within that coalition, that he then should be logically expected to be the front runner, unless the party and himself included makes the sacrifice to say, let's elevate someone else. But who is that someone else?
That's true, and I think they should.
But who is that someone else?
It would be unwise.
Whereas maybe 6 years ago, we knew that there was always Musi, there was always who was this other lady, Mazibuko, if I'm not mistaken. She left to go study elsewhere. We also knew Helen Zilla was one of the leading voices. Abapumzile Fantame and Ababanban. Like we knew, okay, these were the emerging voices within the DA. I think the power has now been centralized to say either John Steenhuisen or Helen Zilla. Like you don't really identify someone else.
Okay. Let's vote ANC then. No. No, I agree. I've actually also written about this and even did a video about this, that suddenly, if we do vote the ANC out, the logical next person is John Steenhuisen, right? And that's a deeply unappealing prospect. There's no doubt about that. And I wouldn't... those parties must come together and find someone more palatable than John Steenhuisen.
It's possible that it could be a sacrifice. Within that coalition, they take a leader of the party that has 6% only, because the DA, if they are made to make a sacrifice, they're not going to transfer the sacrifice from John Steenhuisen to say, okay, how about you, the EFF, because they're not going to want Julius Malema to be the leader of the country.
And there are creative things that can be done in this country, like we must try and reimagine more creative solutions. Those parties could come together and say, you know what, actually, we want an independent president who enjoys wide support of the country, and we'll put them as the president and will preside over the rest of the cabinet. We understand that none of us enjoys enough support to have a presidential candidate, but we will drive the political agenda. That's an option, But this thing of us always thinking like, oh, well, if it's not the ANC, then there must be some... There are creative ways. But I'm prepared to say this. I am prepared to say this. It's too important that we remove the ANC from power. No matter what, an opposition coalition is going to be preferable, because quite frankly, I would rather have an unpalatable president for 5 years who can be voted out again than be in stage 6 for 5 years.
Yeah. I think a lot of people agree with you. Yeah,
that's the choice. And if we have to swallow porcupines to get to that more important overriding statement, which is that the ANC has had 30 years and has failed, then unfortunately we're going to have to swallow the porcupine.
Well, a lot of people won't want to swallow porcupines, but they will agree with you. Your thesis to the ANC must be removed from power.
And those opposition parties must think about this.
Yeah, right? that's their challenge.
They must rise to the political wisdom of realizing, we may not have a presidential candidate. Who could we convince maybe to stand as president? It's tough. It's tough. We don't have perfect options. But the question is that or stage 6? You tell me.
Yeah. That's a good point. In your engagements with Ugogo Obremachekwe, he mentions, and of course this is statistically available as well, the ever-increasing number of people who turn their backs on the ballot, like people who don't vote, who are eligible. The number sits at between 5 and 6 million. I think we can bet on this that it will rise to somewhere between 8 and 9 million. Now, how do we convince those people? Because they're not doing any justice to the cause when they turn their backs on the political process, which is available, the electoral process that's available. Let
me tell you what I would actually love.
Sure.
Never mind an opposition coalition and whatever, right? I would love for there to be a political alternative that we built. So like our generation. And a true alternative, not from a breakaway from any one of these parties, but our generation coming together to say, you know what, actually, it's time that we took the whole thing because this older generation has just lost. And the current political status quo hasn't been able to generate anything exciting. And we actually built a new political alternative from the ground up. And I think it's doable. But the problem with that, right, is you need R1 billion.
Yeah,
do
for
it.
sure.
So
there's a direct correlation between you campaigning and the amount of money you spend on campaigning
Exactly.
and the percentage you will earn at the
Exactly.
national election.
Exactly.
Isn't
So
that problematic though?
it is problematic, and many people say to me, "Why don't you go into politics?" Right? The reason I don't go into politics is because I don't believe in any of the current. I couldn't live with myself in any of the current parties, right? And I would need to feel at home, politically at home. And I don't feel politically at home in any of the parties. But I'm not going to do a suicide mission where there are no resources and you end up embarrassing yourself. So if I were to ever get into politics, best believe that there would be a plan, there would be resources, and it would be done right. Because I wouldn't be interested in just doing, something for 5%. It would be, how does this entire generation win power in one election? So the thing we would have to do is figure out, how are we going to marshal those resources so that we can take down a massive political establishment? And you need $1 billion. So that's the question. How do you get the $1 billion? And then when you get the $1 billion, you can't get the $1 billion from somewhere and someone who's going to tell you what to do once you get power.
I mean, Rob Hersoff has, I said this to Penel because they have a good relationship. And I have a relationship with Penel. And I pressed him on this and I said, if I've never heard a puppet master speak, I believe when I'm listening to Rob Hersoff, I'm listening to a puppet master, whatever that means. But I just said that. And because I had heard him for the first time speaking maybe 2 months ago, and I'm like, ooh, hey, okay, you sound like someone who sends people to do things. The brazen nature in which he was speaking. Yeah. And then he's been on that campaign of speaking now. Why do you think
I saw that speech as well. Yeah. And a couple of things came to mind. Firstly, I want to say I think it is brave and important that someone like that is prepared to speak out and actually say that we're in a crisis, and the crisis is of the ANC and indeed Cyril Ramaphosa's making. Part of the problem we've had over the last 5 years is that everyone who's powerful, everyone who's rich, everyone who's senior, everyone who's a politician, former ANC politicians, all want to keep quiet when we can all see the country is falling apart. So I appreciate that step, but I have huge differences with, his decision to fund institutions like AfriForum, the Institution of Race Relations, which I believe are regressive institutions that perpetuate forms of racism. So I think it's important that many people in South Africa speak out, but we have to have a serious debate about what's going to replace the ANC. Because one thing we don't want to do is replace the ANC, send that important democratic message, but then suddenly we find ourselves in a potentially worse position. So like I was saying, in a perfect world, what I would like to see, and what I would even like to be a part of, if it was possible, is that new thing that really has a fresh new vision for the country, led by young people, that is funded in a creative way that does not just rely on billionaires telling you what to do, because I'm not convinced that billionaires necessarily know what to do.
I think we can make the logical assumption that they want the status quo to be maintained. Of course, they don't want stage 6, which affects directly their businesses. So if they were to fund whatever new vision there is, it would be for the maintenance of the current status quo, which is not forcing the transferring of economy and land and power to the poor, or a better distribution of income in this country.
Absolutely.
So with that being said, when I listened to Rob Hersoff, I'm going to go back to this, that he actually was talking about the way that he was speaking, man, was so worrying. Besides the speech that everyone has seen, there was a Zoom interview he was having on another YouTube channel.
Okay.
And he looks like, I mean, don't be surprised to get a DM from him, for example. Okay. It looks like he's been scouting young South Africans who have a following. He spoke about MacG, spoke about Penwell. I wish I still had that link. I would send it to you. He spoke about a lot of people. I'm like, this sounds like a person who's been scouting who are the best black kids who can propel his message forward. You know, the way he was speaking. That's why I was saying, like, if I've never seen a puppet master speak, I believe today from that moment I've seen. You know, would you be happy to be funded by him? You're saying creative ways to be funded, and you don't want to be funded by a billionaire. What if that was the option on offer?
I don't think so. You know, I would be happy to have a platform that many people contributed to, but I wouldn't feel comfortable knowing that I was beholden to just one person who also has a political agenda. So I don't think this platform needs to say, like, you're not allowed to donate if you're rich. But there needs to be a diversity of donations so that no one person can call the tune. And there would need to be political principles in place before, which if you're giving money, you must accept. Like, we're serious about redistribution of wealth in this country. We're serious about racial justice. Yes, we want good governance. Yes, we want to fight corruption. But we're not going to do so under the pretext of, you know, scrapping redistributive measures and bringing the black majority out of poverty and giving them power. So if you're not on board with that, I think it's a fool's errand to start something, because you're going to end up disappointing people. And yes, you get a bit of limelight or you get a bit of power, but this is something my father actually has always taught me. Always think about long term and potentially how history will remember what you've done. And that's sometimes why he does things that look crazy in the moment. You know. But when you look back further, you know, you start realizing, okay, he's a long-term decision maker. So I think it would be short-termist to just say, oh yes, someone wants to give me money now, let me do this thing. No. I think we have the creativity and the capacity to figure this thing out. It's just that, you know, like, life comes in the way and all of that. But ultimately, what our generation should be doing is saying, how many of us are there? What wealth can we put together with all of us? And how do we drive a specific agenda such that we actually take over the country? And not just take over the country, but once we take over the country, we do this, and this for 10, 20 years. And other generations have done it. You know, other generations have done it. But I'm starting to plant this idea, because it might not be me who does it, or maybe I'll be a part of it or not. But we need to think that big, you know, because no one's going to do it for us. That's for sure.
Yeah. What have you